and here we are on this discussion panel, taking that reinventing the organization into a question one level below. So with that, there needs to be some kind of leadership revolution. Why do we need to radically rethink leadership and management in the new norm? Why is that important? Now, that's a big question. We're going to move now straight into our discussion panel. For those of you in our audience who were not here at the very beginning, you will have heard Michele Zanini, the author of HUMANOCRACY, just now. So Michele was talking with us. We also have Caldwell, who's joined us again, the COO at FundApps. And we are really pleased now to have Victoria Bradford join us as well, the head of people ops at Funding Circle. So that's a way of doing a quick intro for all of us. And actually, Victoria, having not yet heard from you, I'm going to come to you first. And here we are on this discussion panel, taking that reinventing the organization into a question one level below. So with that, there needs to be some kind of leadership revolution. Why do we need to radically rethink leadership and management in the new norm? Why is that important? Now, that's a big question. So let's double click one level below to kick us off. And actually, Victoria, I'm going to go to you first and ask, in the context of kind of radically challenging the norm, what does leadership actually mean in a modern organization? What does good look like?
Definitely. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thanks to Hibob. So I think what I'm going to talk about is just this concept of lazy leadership and lazy management. I know that's quite a strong term to use. And I think we were seeing a shift towards this not being an acceptable way to lead pre-pandemic anyway. But the pandemic has obviously sped everything up in this new normal, future of work, et cetera, et cetera. And we're at a point now where the old sort of leadership tactics of leading by fear in that hierarchy of power that you've got in a corporate environment just doesn't work anymore. Lazy leadership relies on building rapport through social interactions, so be it in the coffee queue or at the water cooler or in the pub after work. And if you're not seeing your employees on a day-to-day basis, you can't rely on that anymore. You've got to be carving out time and actually having a conversation human to human with your employees to find out who they are. And I think that as well really links into this whole concept of performance reviews. So I was taking some notes while you were talking about that, Michele, because I think, again, we get to this point where managers particularly can feel that come the end of the year, actually, yeah, I can just tell this person how they've done. I've caught up with them loads of times in the office. We're always having a chat when we're getting our lunch. But actually, now that you're not seeing them every day, when you have a one-to-one with them, it's a precious time. And you need to be using that time to have those conversations and to learn how to manage performance without seeing someone chained to their desk. This whole 9 to 6, if you work for Funding Circle, 9 to 5, perhaps if you work elsewhere, concept has shifted. And yes, we talk about all these benefits that, I don't know, are a little bit dubious, like you can put your washing on at lunch and you can go to the gym or whatever. But actually, I would challenge managers and leaders to use this to harness their management ability and be like, okay, the ways that I've been assessing performance in my business function or in my team, whatever it might be, does that work now that I can't actually walk through the office and see who is still there at 6:30 and you get a gold star because you're still sat at your desk? So that was a bit of a long answer, Toby, sorry. But I just think that this whole lazy leadership thing is going to come unraveled. And those who are true leaders, who truly believe in people and trust their people to do good jobs, will get that trust in return. And subsequently, those who don't operate in that way perhaps might not be so successful in this new normal.
It's almost like you're saying, you've got to invest in having those deeper level connections, because the tokenism that you're categorizing under lazy leadership just won't cut it anymore. I'm interested to hear from you, Pat, with this idea of lazy, when you think about your organization, can you think of examples of that? Like, did that lazy leadership trigger anything with you?
I think my grin while Victoria was explaining that might have given it away, but yeah, it's obviously, it's a harsh, but I think relevant way of putting it. I think the piece we might have, if I look at our growth journey over the last 4 years, we get this concept called an accidental leader. And as teams grow out, I mean, we must have seen this within Funding Circle as well. As teams grow out, you end up with, you might get 8 developers on a team. And then you realize then that that's too much scope for this, idea of a manager. And so you promote your best developer. And they go into this team leadership position and then fundamentally realize, like the first time I stepped into a leadership position, that we haven't got a clue what we're doing. And we're making it up as we go. And I think that actually encourages the lazy leadership. I'm not sure we've ever stepped back and truly said, what is the leadership that's actually needed within this team and within this company? How do we actually assess someone's skills to be able to do that? And just because somebody might be the best person on the floor in a manufacturing plant, the best person on a mine site, the best developer in a team, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be successful in that role. So I think we've created lazy leaders, and I can take some accountability for that as a mostly former HR person. Is that I think we created the problem, and now we just need to call it out and fix it.
And I think that's a good, sorry, Toby, just to jump in on that point, but I think that's a really good point as well about being scared of fixing problems. I don't think that's necessarily an HR problem to solve. I think that's HR in collaboration with other business leaders, but actually where you identify that you've got an unnecessary layer of middle management, or you've just got a management layer that doesn't work, not being afraid of pulling that rug out. Things aren't going to fall over. It's going to be okay. And actually you might be in a position where you're far more productive and you've got happier employees and the output is greater. But yeah.
I love that. Michele, you showed that org structure with the 2 directors and the 900 people and the coaches and everything. The funny thing is that when we think of leader, we automatically assume that those 2 directors are the leaders. But in actual practices, in terms of who's inspiring work to be done, who might be making decisions, who's leading that communication interface, there's probably, I'm just going to take a guess, 50 of those 900 people demonstrating leadership. We just don't call them leaders, and maybe we need to redefine some of that as well.
Yeah, it's such an important point, Pat. I mean, and by the way, those are 900 teams, so 16,000 people.
Wow.
And the teams don't really have a leader, so it's more than that. But you're absolutely right, because I am sure if our audience, if I asked you, when I say executive team, who do you think about? You probably think about the C-suite, right? Who are, you could argue, I mean, if the definition of leadership is like making amazing things happen and catalyzing positive change in an organization, I'm not sure all those people are leaders in that way, and they're often not a team, right? We've in a way, like I wish we could come up with a different term than leadership, because it's been kind of compromised and conflated with management and positional authority. And as you say, Pat, like sometimes the people that have the most power, the most influence, the most positive impact in your organization, that is not correlated to where you sit on the hierarchy. And I think HR is a little bit complicit in perpetuating this kind of like misconception, because we have high potential programs and leadership development programs and whatever, and everything is like tiered by rung of the ladder. I mean, I'll just give you one quick example. I was just looking at the curriculum of a learning and development company that does L&D for companies across all levels, from individual contributors to the executive. So there are courses around thinking strategically, and then and other courses, and then they map like for whom is this course relevant, and it was not relevant. It was relevant for the the EVPs, the SVPs, whatever. But then further down the organization, it wasn't indicated to be a relevant course. So what you're telling most of the people in the organization is like, you shouldn't think strategically, which is nuts, right? So anyway, I'll just get off. I'll get off the soapbox. But I do think that expanding the definition of what a leader is, and really fighting against the tendency that we have of conflating that with hierarchy. And it's not, as you say, Pat, it's not that we don't want hierarchy. The question is, how is a hierarchy built? And to whom is a hierarchy accountable, right? Is it accountable to the led, or is it accountable to the person that appointed you? And I think we can reimagine that as well. But anyway, I'll stop.
As you talk, I mean, I think some of this, I'd love for us to be able to rip up the use of common terms, but I feel like to say that we will just eradicate the term leadership from organizations, at least overnight, is going to be tough. So let me say that you can't do that. That can't be an answer. So I'm going to say leadership has to stay in as a term, but instead we need to expect more from them. And actually, Michele, you gave in your presentation, you gave us some tangible examples around what HR leaders specifically can do. And you went on to give another example. Then I'm going to go back to Victoria. You are one of our HR leaders on this call. I know, Pat, you have been, but I'm going to go by Victoria's current role. So, you know, when you think about your own role, Victoria, and perhaps what you could be doing differently day to day as an HR leader to really help bring about a readiness for a new version of the world of work, what are some of the things that are preoccupying you? What are some of the things you wish you were doing?
Good question. I think some of the things we are doing, but could have more focus on and would like to see as more of a norm is promoting is the wrong word. Promoting the brand of people in the business who aren't your stereotypical leader. So to your point, yes, we have hierarchy. It might not be ideal. We're not going to remove it because we've agreed that as a start of this conversation. But for those at the top of the pre-established hierarchy, to be giving a platform to those who are leaders, be it in the area they work in, or they are thought leaders in the business, or they are the most creative, whatever it might be. So they are standing alongside them in front of the rest of the employee population or in front of the market. And then you get to a point where it becomes the norm for actually, you might have your leader as a CEO, but you might also accept that this individual contributor who designed a new product or conceptualized a new product is also a leader within our company. And that really inspires those as well who, frankly, don't want to do people management, because yes, to get to the top of that ladder, you do typically, stereotypically, you have to be, oh, I'm a team lead, now I'm a manager, now I'm a head of, now I'm director, now I'm CEO, whatever. That doesn't suit everyone. And we know that's well established. I don't need to go into that. But just doing that would really make a difference. And I think that requires some vulnerability from the leaders that we typically have, and not necessarily at Funding Circle, not necessarily at FundApps, not necessarily at Hibob, but just across the industry. That takes vulnerability for people who are perhaps very well established in their careers, started their career wearing a suit and tie. You need to go to this university, and then you need to do this, and you need to do this, you need to earn your stripes. But for them to actually fast track people in their stripes, I think is the best way for that to happen.
You're twigging memories from Pat's case study earlier on when you were talking about some of the discomfort around this, Pat. I'd love you to build on this a little bit. I mean, you told us that sometimes we can't just rely on past experience, and sometimes this is uncomfortable. So yeah, just what's your reaction to that? What do you think HR should be expecting of itself in this?
I was nodding again, Victoria. Maybe it is the inner HR person coming out thinking that resonates really strongly there. I think it's an interesting kind of predicament that we're in, because I love that piece around vulnerability. If I look at my career, I've probably spent a decent chunk of my career contributing to this problem. That is the nature of it, because I think as humans, we're very, very almost taught and built to not want to say things like, I don't know, or maybe someone else has a different answer to this. And then we lean back on our own experience to work out, okay, well, I've seen this happen before, therefore I can replicate it again, use a bit of innovation or creativity or insert other buzzword here and hopefully make for a different outcome. And the reality is that the challenges that we're facing are going to require a different type of leadership, a non-lazy leadership, a non-ADD manager to be able to solve these kind of things. I always take that hybrid work as the perfect example. Just how many companies have defaulted back to a 1% incremental improvement on 2019 flexible work practices, when we just saw probably 30 years of evolution in hybrid work, if the pandemic hadn't happened, all be condensed within a little 18-month period. And we have to change that lens. I think it's not just a HR thing. HR can be blamed for lots of stuff simply because it's a people item. I think it's fundamentally a business item. It's fundamentally around designing work rather than roles. And when you put all them together, we're going to have to refresh how we approach leadership, how we approach work, and not just lean on a leadership team whose narrow tunnel vision is always going to influence the outcome.
I'm going to ask a question that builds on this idea of the sort of future of work, and something that you gave us the example of hybrid working again there, Pat. And I think you guys would relate to the fact that very often the future of work / the new normal and hybrid working are sort of almost used in the same breath, and almost there's a full stop at that point. And actually, we have heard some examples already from this panel that there is more to the future of work than that. And as a next question, I'd love to unpack that with you all now. And Michele, let's go back to you. I mean, not least because you've already started to share quite a few examples, and I'd like to go a bit deeper on this. You know, what does this actually mean, the new normal or the future of work? It's got to mean more than just hybrid. Like, what else is out there?
It better. Just because you can do calls like these in your pajamas, or as Victoria said, you can load the dishwasher between calls. I mean, okay, that's improvement. But again, back to this ADD, like, you know, the challenges we have as a society, we face amazing challenges and opportunities. We just need to, you know, that's not, you can mobilize a little bit of a commitment from people by giving them a little bit more flexibility that way. But that to me is like such a low bar. We deserve better. We need to aim higher. So, you know, I think, and I am a little bit frustrated that all the attention around the future of work is often reduced to this modality shift, which again, I don't want to be dismissive of it. It's significant. If you don't have to commute, if you can be at home, it's an advantage for sure. But again, first, it only applies to a fairly small, significant but small sample of the population. So like, you're not thinking about everybody else, like, you know, the 80% that has to show up at work because you can't be in a grocery store via Zoom, right? And attend to the customer. And second, you know, I think there are, you know, what needs to be done to really free people at work is create that that sense of ownership, which means giving people autonomy and discretion, but at the same time, it also means giving them the tools so that they can exercise that autonomy responsibly, the information so that they can do that in an intelligent way. And, you know, I mean, we talked about hierarchy being inevitable, and to some extent, it is of a certain kind. I mean, some people are just going to have, if for anything, going to have more say than other people. But again, I'll go back to this point. Like, to me, the fact that you have Hire with 84,000 people and Bertha with 16,000, and then there's one company that I've just recently written an article about called Vikusville, they're a Russian retailer, $2 billion company, 20,000 people, food retailer, 2 layers. So one needs to explain to me, like the owner should be on those who want 7, 8 layers to tell me why they need 7 or 8 layers, because it's obvious you can do it without, right? So I would almost like say, you know, say the default is these kinds of organizations that have shown a future that works, and you have to explain to me why we can't do that. And so kind of put the onus on those who want to keep the status quo, and really challenge them, hold their feet to the fire so that they can think a little bit more expansively about what could be.
Pat, what's that triggered for you?
So pre-joining the tech industry, you picked up the Australian accent probably. The first half of my career was in the Australian coal mining industry. So obviously worlds apart in terms of how work gets done and how teams are structured. And most people probably haven't been on a coal mine, but you have a production department, a maintenance department, an engineering department, a processing plant department, support functions, HR, safety, and everything like that. And obviously this booming, let's bring tech innovation to something that's historically, you know, a heavy industry. And we're asking I think I was smiling during that, because this concept of we're asking managers, I use the term managers kind of loosely here, but we're asking functional managers who have a small remit to innovate and find a better way of working. But the reality is their innovation will always be limited to the tiny little functional remit that they actually have. And as that mine is built, or as production processes are sorted, it's because we've built org structures and then aligned work to it, instead of building work and trying to align roles to it and how you package them. And I was giving you a good grin, Michele, during that, because I was taking this concept of a 3,500 person mine site that has probably 6 or 7 layers once you get down to frontline supervisors, and saying, okay, well, let's say we went in and took out everyone that was not on the front line of the coalface, pun intended, was not on the coalface of everything that happened there, and simply said that they need to self-organize. Obviously, there's probably a deeply philosophical bit around what will break really quickly in that case. But what would innovation look like if we removed the tunnel vision that small remit functional managers have? And coming back, Victoria, to your point around vulnerability, sometimes the answer to innovation is that, hey, my role may not be needed. Or maybe my role doesn't deliver value beyond my own sense of pride or ego. And maybe that's not such a bad thing, but that's hard. That's a pretty hard human response to get out of people.
Something in that, there's a very personal reaction to that around how do we know if we're kind of getting this right? And I suppose if I think about that question a little bit differently, this isn't binary, it's a journey, of course. And I think what we've heard in some of the stories today is just how much that journey needs to rumble on in order to really kind of continue to push the bar forwards. But little by little, we must be able to find out if we're kind of moving in the right direction. And I guess that's one thing I'd love to just round off by asking you. And I'd go to you first, actually, Victoria, on this one. I mean, how do you know, how do you measure if you're actually taking steps in the right direction to rethink the organization, to rethink leadership? What do you use day to day to know if you're making the right steps?
It's a big question. I think there's two halves to it. There is obviously, you know, all the people data that the HR teams love to talk about and use great systems for. So be it from attrition and reasons that people are leaving, whether people are coming back from family leave, parental leave, your DE&I stats, there's all of that. But I think there is also, and please feel free to contradict me on this, but I think there is this, we can measure through sentiment to a certain extent. So we've all heard about the Great Resignation, which obviously we've touched on as well. And a lot of us have heard of that through either our professions, but obviously also through Instagram and through social media and just through what is fashionable to talk about right now. And right now, the fashionable thing to talk about is the fact that everyone wants a new job because they're being chained back to the office. So I think when we get to a point where it is the norm, when you are with your friends on a Saturday night having dinner and you talk about this new leader in your business who perhaps doesn't look the way that a leader used to look or doesn't act in the way that a leader used to act, we've then got to a point of a societal shift. And I think that is what it takes. And that goes back to Pat's point about parental leave. Like, it's amazing that FundApps are doing things like that, but actually there needs to be a governmental change on this thing, then a societal change and a change in the way that we view the role of you know, gendered roles in parenthood. And that relates to the world of work as well, and just this ingrained image of what does a leadership team sat around a table look like. Once we get to a point where that shifts, I know that is very hard to measure, and I'm talking very like pie in the sky, but that's what I believe, yeah.
Okay. Victoria, you've given us quite an inspirational image, I think, there around a kind of future state of more than just the world of work. And I regret having to do this because I wish we could carry on talking about these and a bunch of other questions for many more minutes, but our time is up. So all I can do now is offer a huge thanks to Michele, to Pat, to Victoria, for coming and joining this panel, for sharing your case studies and your book. Michele, what a fascinating and also vital set of topics. And let's just hope that these remain the kind of conversations that we're having as HR leaders going forward, rather than the timeframes of our next performance review. So thank you all very, very much.